You know, on Tokyo on Fire, we are constantly focusing on the economy, the Japanese economy, and in particular, the administration's efforts to boost the economy to get Japan out of this recurring recession. This has been going on for 20 years. Tourism is on the rise. Exports are down. Exports are up. They're giving us different numbers. It looks like Japan has once again fallen into recession, Michael.
Yeah, this week we saw, on the earlier part of this week, we were told that once again, the economy shrank in the July to September quarter. That the shrinkage was the second quarter in a row, so we're technically in a recession. This week, a whole bunch of different commentators have been saying, aha, Abenomics is not working, or yes, this is actually just demonstrative of the way it is working. Right. It's just working in a funny way. There's been a lot of debate. My sense is that you have basically headwinds that you're still fighting. One is the tax rise that was done with the consumption tax. We have to look forward to that happening again the next time the consumption tax is raised. And this week, the ruling party got together again to try to figure out how much it should be raised on certain items. Right. But overall, we have here in Japan a demographic collapse going on. The total number of the working population has been receding for several years now. That is going to cause some kind of limitation on the ability of the economy to respond to anything. Now, even though we have a recession, this is one of the things that folks pointed out, we have at the same time the extremely low unemployment. Unemployment has fallen from 4.3% when Abe came into office to now 3.4%. And over the last 6 months, when supposedly this recession was kicking in, right, unemployment went up by 0.1%. You know, it's a tiny, tiny number. So that, okay, it's a recession, but it doesn't really look like one. It doesn't really feel like one. It's just there in the numbers. And that's basically because there are fewer and fewer people. And at that point, even if you have shrinkage, you know, on a per person basis, on a person on the street basis, you may not feel it at all.
I think part of it, too, is that we need to expand some of these concepts. Womenomics, for one. Timothy and I went to hear a talk on womenomics, and what was on offer there wasn't anything particularly new. And now I've been here long enough that I've heard of all the talk about getting more women in the workplace after they have children, right, or in the corporate suite by 2020, 30%. And let's enlarge that to really look at what are people motivated by? Because I wonder, too, if it's not just about women. I wonder if maybe men and women don't want to put in these excessively long hours, and they want higher quality of life. Right. Maybe they want just a certain standard of living. Maybe they're sort of happy with kind of floating along. The go-go Japan of decades ago is never going to come back. I don't have any sense of that happening. But of course, you can't have a collapse, and there is going to be a decline in the population. But I just wonder if there ought to be more of a kind of reaching out to people to find out, really, what are you thinking? Because too many of the conferences I go to, it's people talking from the stage, right, and then a huge crowd listening, and you don't have a whole lot of interaction. You have a lot of exchange of business cards, but right, it's just sort of taking a sense of where are we as a country, but I see people working long hours. I wonder about the efficiency, and that will come up, of course, occasionally. But I think the big bugaboo is the work-life balance, because without it, you will not be able to thrive and have a sense of, I want to start a family. You've got to have that.
Absolutely. Well, this kind of falls into your bailiwick, too, that the government can walk the walk, but they've got to talk the talk, too. And it seems like this branding that is promoted by the Japanese government about having a quality of life, having quality of education, having a lifestyle that supports, having a family. it's not supported. And this is the talk that you and I joined on, I think it was Monday. The numbers don't show that. They show that the workforce is fragmented. There are full-time workers, and then there are part-time workers, like we were talking about their application for the terrorist expert. 3 days a week you can work for us, but that's not full-time and it doesn't include benefits.
Yeah, and since Abe became Prime Minister, the number of full-time workers has still fallen. Abenomics has not addressed that issue, which is to get more people into the permanent workforce. What has happened instead is that 2 million people now work part-time. More women are working.
More women
but
are doing it,
most of those positions are part-time. Now, there might be a transition period that we are in where finally the number of permanent positions being offered is now turning. But we're not seeing it, we've not seen improvements. The number of people on public assistance since Abe became into power, it's gone up.
Oh yeah.
Okay, the number of people who have no savings, the percentage of people who have zero in their savings accounts, who live from paycheck to paycheck, that number has increased by 5 percentage points in this short period of time. So that Abenomics, while it has a great effect upon corporate life, and part of what you're talking about, work-life balance, those persons who are working those long hours are actually being rewarded. They're getting, may not be getting a lot more in wages, but they're getting big bonus payouts. The people who are in the major corporate sector. But even with that, the corporations have made out like bandits during this period of time. When Mr. Abe came into power, they had about 270 trillion. That was, at the time, that was $2.7 trillion. 270 trillion yen in retained earnings, which is just money sitting in the bank at corporates. In the 3 years that has since passed, that amount has gone from 270 trillion to 340 trillion. It is just, they're just piling it up and putting it away, and it's not going into the it's not going to the workers, it's not going to the shareholders, and no surprise, with money going just right into the bank where it just sits, the economy is in the doldrums. Now, Mr. Abe has nothing up his sleeve to get that change. So the social change is important, work-life balance, but we got some real numbers issues.
Well, how about another discussion we went to recently about the sharing economy and using technology and really creating different definitions of what do we mean by economy. Because if you look at the origins, it's really household. It really is your pocketbook. It's your way of life. And so why not have a sort of more eco-friendly options here, the way you would see the shared rides. I mean, of course, we have great public transportation, but bicycles or even the use of, with renting, I mean, there's been discussion about Airbnb, and I could see that sort of flourishing, especially with young people, because what I'm hearing from young people is they don't want to go corporate. I mean, some do, but they really do want to create something that's an extension of sort of their passion, almost like what you might call a hobby, which I guess to some parents would be horrifying to hear this, because they think, how are you going to make a living? But they're very clever, the born into the internet types. And if they were given sort of as part of the educational structure here, these different options to show how there are parallel economies, I think that would really be valuable, because so much of the econ talk, whether it's Abenomics or GDP, it's very macro. And micro or hybrid, collective, co-op, these are new terms. The NGO and the MPO sector, these are sort of naturals for a lot of women too, but I mean young men too. It's just that in the United States, a lot more women wanted to go the nonprofit, the so-called third sector. And I don't hear a lot of that being discussed, except for people maybe who are into the high tech and the digital economy. But I'd like to see that more.
Well, you would have to undo decades and decades of social and corporate policy in order to get to that kind of economy.
Okay,
well, I mean, basically what anyone would want to have is a permanent position.
That's what they want, and there is value in just that. I mean, not
it's an actual
value.
asset. It's one way of showing that you are a person of good standing within the social media.
I know,
and almost impossible to fire someone.
Yeah, right.
Almost impossible. So that once you have achieved that level, you're going to say, okay, I don't have to really make a huge amount of effort. But I make just enough, and watch what everybody else is doing.
Stay calm.
Stay down.
Yeah.
Stay
Wow,
calm.
that's so
don't stick.
entrepreneurial.
Then entrepreneurialism is absolutely stamped out by that system, because not only is being obedient and quiet and
Don't rock the boat.
Don't.
That's why I'm thriving here. Everything you've just described is me, obedient and compliant.
Absolutely. I don't know when we're going to get yanked from the show.
No, you realize I'm thriving because I'm Professor Emeritus. I have retired early, which is why Japan is very good.
Yes. Yeah.
But for many Japanese workers, though, I think it's very challenging. I met a Japanese woman last night who was sort of in between jobs. It was like jaw-dropping to me because that's so rare.
Very rare,
when you
right.
hear anything like that. And I knew it would probably cause a little angst because you're so defined.
A little?
Yes.
Right. You're defined so much
By your job,
your
business
title.
card.
That's right.
And the other thing, too, is that it's not equal pay for the same kind of work or labor that you're performing.
That's
if you are
legally, there's no requirement that you be paid that way.
right, so the gap is different. So once you check out of society and you're not the regular employee, full-time employee, and you've got the business card, and you go off, and maybe you're working 3 days a week here and 2 days a week someplace else. It's really, really difficult, and you have some hard choices to make.
And even if you wanted to be, you had done a few years as a corporate life and you wanted to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Who in their right mind would want to be one in this country? If you could, let's say you start opening an office.
Right.
All right, and you hire someone, you hire a second person, and you realize that first person really was a bad decision. Right. Under the labor laws, there's nothing you can do.
Right.
You can't fire that person.
Why?
Yeah. Well, you must have cause. You have to have, real, legitimate, demonstrable cause. I'm
You
firing you.
can't do an at-will contract,
there's
which is so common?
No, there's
really?
not.
Okay.
At-will contracts are
So
not
that
recognized.
immediately makes, if you leave the corporate sector and try to start your own business, you're insane.
Yes.
You're certifiable because there is no way that you're going to be able, unless you have a very wealthy family and the ability to sit on whatever it is you're doing for a long time, building up your employee base very slowly, checking them out one by one until you know everything about that person before you ever give them a contract.
But aren't people making the connections then between that risk-averse, that sort of lack of where you can't fire anyone.
Right.
Make the connection between that and this sort of stagnant,
Sure.
this sort of recession.
Sure, that's what the government is talking about with labor reform. But the moment you talk about that, everybody who has a permanent position says they're coming for us.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, not only that. I mean, there are
Right.
groups that are collecting young fellows who are starting their companies, taking them to Silicon Valley for study groups and bringing them back. So there are a lot of people that are trying to enrich the environment here because there is talent here.
And
there are
I'd
great
like
ideas.
to give a little shout out to the Tomodachi initiative, which I think is terrific because that came out of Operation Tomodachi, and Ambassador Roos wanted to put something in place. The predecessor to Ambassador Kennedy wanted to put in place a public-private partnership, and it's Japanese companies that have really taken the lead here. And you are having now these young people going to Silicon Valley, going to spend a summer at Stanford, learning about an entrepreneurial economy. That is really a great model that I think should be replicated.
Well, sometimes it works, and sometimes the Japanese government or any government kind of gets it right, but not quite. And sometimes some idea like that is usurped by some powerful force. I mean, look what's happened with Cool Japan or Cool Biz. You know, these kinds of things. Sometimes they have great ideas, they have a great concept, and in implementation or in the fruition, some of the better parts of it are plucked away and stolen by the powerful people who have been participating from the beginning.
Well, the idea of that we have to get labor law legislation, we have to get going on it, was one of the reasons why there was supposed to be an extraordinary diet
That's right.
session this fall in order to prepare for the next year and get it out of the way.
Right.
But we're not going to have that session. The Abe government is refusing to accept the request from the opposition parties right now. Let's open up the diet. Let's get going on legislation. Let's work on this. They say, no, we're going to start immediately after the new year. We'll open up, but we're not going to do anything. And so these issues of labor law, which were the subject that was supposed to be discussed this fall,
Shelved. Right.
I think it's because they go from Halloween right into Christmas.
Yes. Yes, two very famous traditional Japanese
And
holidays.
you have to have Christmas music from that date, from November 1st
That's right.
on.
Listen, getting back to your point about, changing tradition and hundreds of years of a corporate dynamic, the government's role in crafting the story and kind of opening the doors is so important. And once again, sometimes they get it right and sometimes they don't. But they do need to walk the walk and talk the talk. There's an example where I think they kind of got it wrong, and that is in trying to get women into the upper corporate levels of Japanese society. That was a great idea that didn't have much wind in it.
They put aside in the budget the equivalent of $1 million US, a special fund that a corporation could apply for in order to promote women and the hiring of women. $1 million. And are amazed that
How many takers were there?
one.
There was one.
So that means
One application. And
In 1 year.
In 1 year, one corporation actually applied for the funding. And the funding, it's embarrassing.
Yes.
So we've had more same-sex applicants to the Shibuya mayor's office to
Then-
get the certificate than we've had to this $1 million budget
Right.
Yes,
to get
but
training
that
for
they
women.
even thought of this, and that thought that any company, the award, initial award to each company was 300,000 yen, which is $3,000.
Right.
You're going to change your hiring practices to get $3,000 from the government.
Right. Yeah. Not.
No.
So, so that the match between the rhetoric,
That's right.
where you and the image that you're trying to create, that you're trying these new ideas, and the actual output, sometimes is just pretty embarrassing. How disparate those things
Let's
are.
hope there won't be just one applicant for the 3-day work week for the terrorism.
Yes, that would be interesting to see who signs up. I imagine there are a lot of people who potentially
will be
qualify.
qualified, sure.
Yeah, I know. But you've got to imagine that diplomats and businessmen live overseas and their sons grow up in these countries, and every once in a while some of them are going to be, turned a little bit differently. Yeah, it's a bit of a stretch, but...
Well, now that position has been promoted all over the world, the person who fills it will be immediately interviewed by the press.
Exactly.
And who wants that?
Yeah. Well, it's not even an applicant that must be Japanese if you looked at the qualifications.
They just recommended that you speak Japanese or not?
No, Japanese, they recommended that you speak English, right? And
Well, then I
probably
could
one of
apply.
the... Yes, you could. I think you'd be a top candidate, Dr. Snow. Before we wrap this thing up, the numbers internally, the Japanese are going through a lot of different issues and problems, but a lot of tourism, the spike in tourism tells us that other people, especially in Southeast Asia, are recognizing Japan as a great bargain and a great place to visit.
And not only Southeast Asia, East Asia as a whole. 4 million Chinese have already landed here this year. The first time any national group has exceeded 4 million
So it was
visitors.
doubled, wasn't it?
It was
From
doubled over
last
the
year
year.
to this
That's
year,
right.
it was double the number of Chinese tourists.
And this is despite the fact that the Chinese government and the Japanese government are supposedly still at loggerheads, though we've seen some improvements in relations recently. However, in terms of tourism, Japan is, at least in the Abenomics presentation, that part of the presentation is going gangbusters.
That's going great. He initially said by 2020, I'd like to see tourism flow beyond 20 million, and he's going to hit that perhaps
5 years earlier, yeah.
And we're not hearing any bad stories
That's
out
right,
there,
yeah.
really. That's a huge jump. And you can go to certain parts of Tokyo where you can hear a lot of Chinese being spoken.
like
but,
right outside.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's terrific.
Yeah,
that
I think
we're in a large enough place that the carrying capacity is for more people.
right. Well, tourism is one of the things that Abe is expecting to boost the economy so that we get $6 trillion by 2025.
And it might have a very
Not
significant.
people.
Not people.
They would be coming from other dimensions
They
of
would be
space
coming.
then.
Yes. Yeah.
But tourism has always been an underplayed part of Japanese life and Japanese economy, especially when you compare it to some place like France,
Right.
which had 5 times as many
Yeah,
arrivals
that's right.
in a typical year. And all power to Mr. Abe and all power to the people who are coming here.
Well, let's hope it continues. And
Yeah.
I mean, we live here, so we're strong on Japan. We want to see
Yes.
the economy grow. We want to see the Prime Minister's economic or revitalization win, and we want to see
A world that comes by.
Yeah,
Yes.
come by, stop by. On your way to Asia, have a stop off here.
Spend your
this
money
is your
here.
gateway.
Thank you.